Hi, my name is Brian Cohen. I'm talking to you because I think I'm talking to you because I'm executive director and co-founder of Beam Center. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the things that we do and how we ended up doing the things that we do. But first, some things about me pretty quickly. I grew up in a place in the late 60s, early 70s where I felt like everything was designed for around me and my interests. Um, I was fortunate enough to meet many of my heroes very early in my life, and those heroes generally were musicians like this one, Dexter Gordon, who was a great jazz saxophone player. And I really spent a lot of my early years finding ways to do the things that these heroes did. I fell in love with jazz. I was a saxophone player just like Dexter Gordon. And I was fascinated by jazz's way of balancing individual virtuosity and collective joy and celebration of doing things together. And as a result, I went to a sleepaway camp to do those things. The camp that I went to was called Lighthouse. And I went to learn how to play jazz. And what I came away with was the feeling that a young person gets when adults are taking them seriously and not treating them as students so much as collaborators and peers. And that feeling stuck with me. And I became obsessed with recreating that feeling for other young people. But in the meantime, while I was sort of marinating on that dream and that feeling of recreating that environment for young people, I went to college and got into the music business, where I did unusual things like auctioning Angus on eBay to launch an AC/DC record. But eventually, I decided that I would make my dream real and start a summer camp. And in order to do that, I read some books, and now I realize my slides are out of order, but I'll skip around. I read some books. One of the books I read was How to Change the World by David Borenstein, and it was the first time that I realized that rather than recreating my bliss of a jazz camp in the forest, I had to think about what young people 20, 30, 40, 50 years hence might need. And I read some other books. One of them was Richard Sennett's The Craftsman. And one of the things that Richard Sennett wrote, which stayed with me as I thought about what kind of camp I should be creating with my friend Danny, he said, the craft of making physical things provides insight into the techniques of experience that can shape our dealings with others. In other words, making things isn't just about making things, it's about making yourself and making yourself through other people and with other people. So when we thought about what kind of camp we needed, we started thinking about what we were worried about for young people. We were worried that they were being raised by digital interfaces, and that they were being made false promises about what technology could do for them. They were never bored because there was always entertainment. There were shallow connections being made through, at least at that point in our lives, early 2000s, AOL and the early social networks. They were given perfect interfaces to make choices with. They were being given adult tools, but they were being treated as toys. And one of the most worrisome things for us is that they were being promised that collaboration was frictionless. And so we took all of those worries and we took the books that we were reading and we fashioned them into a summer camp. And we called it Beam Camp. Now, Beam is what comes from a lighthouse. It's not an acronym. It really is the representation of the experience that I wanted to bring forward from my own experience at camp. And we decided to build Beam Camp around the idea of making big things together. And before I go any further into that, I'd like to show you a video about what Beam Camp has become.
At Beam Center, we make things. We call the things we make projects, and they are a tangible expression of our learning, intended for sharing broadly beyond Beam. This learning can be expressed as spectacular installations, interactive technology, personal artwork, functional products, crazy machines, or a mix of all of them. Our approach to making is collaborative. It is an exchange of skills and ideas as beautifully varied as our identities and experiences. In making, we rehearse for the limitless challenges that face us in an unpredictable world. And each moment of every project is a reminder that with communication, community, curiosity, and considerate work, anything is possible.
So that video sort of tells the end of the story before I've even started telling the story. But what you're seeing there is how we use ambitious collaborative projects in various contexts as a platform for youth development and learning. Oops, where does the slide go? Oops, look at that. I seem to have done something weird with my screen, but we'll keep going. So Beam Center amplifies the power of making things together. The practice that we started at camp of collaborating with artists on spectacular projects that are brought to life by young people is the practice that we use in all of our work. I am very much lost in my slides. So at Beam Camp, we do an international design competition where we choose a spectacular work of public art, and we work with the designer over the 6 months prior to camp in order to get it into a position where young people can learn skills that are involved in the building of the project, and then collaborate on the project itself. Here's an example of one that we worked with a landscape architect named Tai-Wook Cha. So at Beam Camp, we do an international design competition to find spectacular projects from designers, architects, sculptors from all over the world. We work with them for about 6 months in order to abstract a curriculum from the project. We sort of think backwards from this idea that the artist would like to bring to life. We figure out the skills that young people will be learning, and then once they've learned the skills, they collaborate in small groups that we call waves in order to bring the idea to life. These are some examples of the kinds of projects that we've done at camp. This is Universal Play Machine, which was the creation of mobile studios in London. This was also happened to be an English architecture firm that created a bread oven that was powered by various kinds of exercise equipment in order to grind the wheat and then make its way into the bread oven. Iceberg, spectacular, changing. This was a piece that changed colors with temperature change, and it was also obviously a spectacular way for young people to experience the lake at camp. So we did beam camp and continue to do beam camp. This summer will be our 20th year. But in 2012, my partner Danny Khan and I decided that we had learned a lot of things that seemed to be useful for young people. Remember, we are not teachers or educators or architects or anything. We're just people who had a desire and a dream to help young people become thriving adults in this particular way. And so we decided to find a way to take the things that we had learned at camp and bring them to New York City. With no particular plan, we opened up shop in a basement in Brooklyn, and we looked for schools, kids to engage with the artists and engineers that we had created relationships with, in the same way that I had worked with those jazz musicians at Lighthouse Camp when I was a kid. The artists and engineers were sharing their passionate curiosity, sometimes unsuccessfully, but over time they would learn how best to make their projects accessible to young people. While we were doing that, we were lucky enough to convince a high school principal to let us work with some of his students. And while we were doing so, we were also lucky enough to have somebody from the Department of Education pass by our place and offer to connect us with more schools. And this was in 2013. Since then, we've grown to work with over 50 schools in various ways. But all of those ways are centered around this notion of collaborative projects, making ideas happen, and a reciprocal design process. So what you're looking at here is an example of what we call the New York City Beam Project. This is the closest analog to what we do at camp, where we do a design competition, in this case with artist Siobhan Nichols, who proposed a public artwork that is a tribute to the American inventor Lewis Latimer. And the way that this project was put together was we were working with a group of young people who were out of work and out of school, and this was their workforce training, so to speak, experience to collaborate with us on building this piece. And so that's an example of one of the ways that we use projects in our practice here at Beam Center. The other way, which is what we spend a lot of time doing, is working in schools. And in this case, our objectives are to support educators to achieve their goals through our approach. So we work with public school teachers from grades pre-K to 12, and we talk to them about what their desires are in terms of creating projects that can enhance their learning objectives for their students. And in order to do that, we bring them into our process. We explore, or we help them explore what about their process is based on their own interests, and we bring our tool set, which is sort of a broad set of making methods, from code and physical computing to welding and woodwork, and we help them create a project that we will support them in the classroom to do with their students. So as I said, we do this throughout the school system in New York City. We work with real public schools. They are schools that are largely low income. We work with a great many recently immigrated students and multilingual learners. And what we have found is that the approach that we take to hands-on collaborative learning creates accessibility for students of all descriptions, whether students have unconventional learning styles and happen to be literate in English, or if they are second language learners of English. It gives them the ability to demonstrate their strengths and their knowledge even before their English literacy is developed. And the way that those projects work is some of them are designed by us, and we share them with the teachers. This is an example of one of our classic projects called Boom Boxes, which we do with many middle school students. And as I said before, some of the projects are designed with teachers based on some text that they're studying with their students, or natural phenomenon. This was a printing press project that we did in a middle school in Queens. And then there are projects that are designed by the students themselves. This was a school where students wanted to make a human-driven smoothie maker. So in any place that we work, we're creating an environment for learning that is very much patterned on the immersive experience of being at a summer camp. And this is regardless of whether we're working in a classroom, in one of our own facilities in Brooklyn, in New York City. It's about creating an environment that is safe, comfortable, and promotes young people to use their strengths while they learn. And we think of these as our conditions, and they consist of belonging, collaboration, responsiveness, reciprocity, and of course love. And we feel very strongly that all of these conditions, plus access to adults who have skills and knowledge that they want to share, is what makes for the Beam magic. And we use that magic not only for learning, but for work. One of the largest parts of our practice in New York City is work readiness and career exploration for teenagers. And in that part of what we do, we are bringing them into our practice as practitioners. So we have several versions of that. One is what we call project leaders, where we are teaching teenagers to be the designers of projects. Just like our staff works with teachers, they work with younger students in after-school programs or in day camps. And they are leading those younger students in projects that the teenagers themselves have created. And as I mentioned before, we also work to train young people to be builders and fabricators of large-scale public artwork. And so our intention there is for young people to understand that regardless of what they may have been told, in order for them to progress in their adulthood and their working life, they have to continually be learning, and that learning is not an alternative to work. It is an essential component of work. And we find that to be an issue of equity, because it is often the case that young people of affluent backgrounds, of educated backgrounds, are often told that in order for them to continue to earn, they have to learn. Whereas the systems of oppression in much of the world teaches marginalized young people that it's one or the other. And we believe that the key to change for everyone is to reintegrate the notion of learning and work as a way forward in your life. So for me, the work that we do very much reflects my own experience at Lighthouse Camp. I had an interest that I was exploring, and that was, of course, a privilege of mine to be able to do that. But when I went to camp and started exploring that, I realized that it was less about the specifics of the discipline that I was interested that made a difference to me. It was the sense that there were adults who were practitioners of this discipline who had opened themselves up to me as a collaborator. And rather than expecting me to sort of replicate what they could do or to practice until I was as good as they were helping me in a journey of figuring things out. They might have been great composers or great saxophone players or instrumentalists of another kind, just like an architect is trained to design buildings or institutional structures, and they were using the elements of their craft to demonstrate for me a thinking process and a being process. And it was very much the environment of camp that enabled them to be able to do that, because their expectations for them were based around education and youth. And so they could employ their skills to impart and to include me into their way of being. And so what we do at camp and at Beam Center is sort of the design and building version of that musical experience that I had as a young person. And so we have developed a network of designers and architects and sculptors who we help to take that journey in the way that they can share their crafts with young people without making them explicitly didactic, but instead sharing them as a way of being, a transferable set of skills, and a way of using their ideas and passions as the motivation for their own development and growth as professionals, and to show that young people that is what work can be. And so that's sort of the core of Beam Center.